Hello and welcome to today's discussion on menopause, mood and cognition. Forgetfulness, brain fog, it's something many of us struggle with during menopause, and it has a huge impact on our quality of life and our careers if we're working. Well, someone who knows all about this is Kathryn Colas, director of her own academy, training people in menopause management, an expert in workplace training, and author of How to Survive the Menopause Without Losing Your Mind. Good title. We're keen to make you a part of our conversation with Kathryn today. So please pop any questions into the comments and we'll do our best to answer them as we go along. Kathryn, thanks so much for joining us today. I know you're a busy woman on World Menopause Day, so really appreciate you taking the time out to talk to us. Kathryn, as I say, I love the title of your book, and so perhaps it's a good place to start in terms of talking about the theme of World Menopause today, that mood and cognition piece. Mood, let's talk about what happens to you. What was your experience during menopause? Did you know you were going through menopause, and what inspired you to start raising awareness?
Well, precisely that. I was postmenopausal. Before I'd realised that all these crazy symptoms I'd been experiencing, which lasted about 10 years, had lasted about 6 years then and were still going on for another 4. I did not have a clue what was going on. I thought I was going mad. I was diagnosed with depression. I self-diagnosed with bipolar. I was doing research all over the place, reading psychology books, and I just couldn't work out what this thing was. And then eventually I realized it was menopause, but I was diagnosed with depression. Did the doctor suggest that it might be because I'm going through menopause? Absolutely not. When I self-diagnosed with bipolar, I spoke to a leading physician on this, and he said, well, yes, it's so very common in women going through menopause, Kathryn. I go, what? We've got, this crazy feeling of being as high as a kite 1 minute and so productive, you don't need any sleep, and then you're on the floor feeling so depressed that you want to end your life. I did enter that room of wanting to end my life. I don't say I wanted to commit suicide, because I don't think I'd ever have done that, but I was at the bottom. I was in a dark place and didn't know how to get out. And so I joined the British Menopause Society. I just tried to get a handle on this thing called menopause and why it was affecting my mood so much. Who would have known that, or who does know that hormones can affect one's mood for such a long period of time? And it's of course because estrogen is that main sex hormone that is motivating our bodies, that is supporting, lubricating, doing everything our bodies need for the last 40 years. And then the bus leaves the station and never to return. So no more estrogen. And we have no idea as ordinary mortals, and a lot of doctors don't either, about how that's affecting our mood and cognition, the brain fog, feeling. The number of women I've spoken to have thought they have dementia, loss of vocabulary. You're in a meeting or you're talking to friends, relations, family, whatever, and suddenly you have a blank moment. Oh goodness, what was I talking about? Is this dementia? And it's and that's depressing in itself, thinking that you've suddenly lost these skills. You're talking gibberish. Instead of one word speaking the whole sentence, you're now speaking that long sentence because you can't speak, you can't find the right words that you used to. And that's it. I think it was mostly emotional symptoms for me. Yes, I had some hot flushes and sweats. I experienced the joint aches and pains, itchy skin, hair loss, skin changes, dryness, all sorts of things. But I think those physical things you can sometimes deal with. You can recognize, you can see it in the mirror, or you can feel it in your body, and I can do something about that. But those other things, the brain fog, you really do feel as if it's got nothing to do with menopause. It's got surely it's got something to do with something else.
Yeah.
And it's not until I found out there was such a thing as hormonal depression that opened my mind to it. And I thought, yes, that's why it's transitional. So yes, bipolar is a very serious diagnosis. I wasn't diagnosed per se, I self-diagnosed, but to have it recognized by a top leading physician, and the fact that we don't know that this can be something that happens to us, and it is transitional, and that it's just about education, isn't it? Knowing a little more about menopause.
And you say it's transitional there, but it's a transitional thing that can have a massive impact, particularly on your relationships. If you're really struggling and you think that you're depressed, and then you think, well, what could it be? Oh, it must be my relationship with my partner. There's lots of people talking in the media today about how it's wrecked their marriages, basically. And they didn't realize that, had they got treatment for it, they might not be separated.
Yes, the same thing happened to me. As I said, you just don't recognize it, that your hormones can be so powerful. And my relationship was the pits. It was at the bottom. We were ready to divorce. I was saying things to myself, we've been together for such a long time, and reading in the media, and we must have reached that stage in our relationship where we just don't gel anymore. We've got to go our separate ways. But we couldn't just have a conversation about what was going wrong. It always degenerated into shouting. I would end up in tears, floods of tears for nothing. Why are you crying? I've got no idea. But, floods of tears. My husband said it was like sleeping with a stranger, living with a stranger. And I interviewed him postmenopausally when I was feeling so much better. And I said, I need to know what it was like, or what it is like, for a man to live with a woman who's going through menopause. And I had tears streaming down my face, asking him this list of questions. Who is this woman he's describing? It's just not me. And then I said, if you can put it into one sentence, what would you say? And he, quite a profound thing, he said, menopause is like a hurricane. It's dangerous and deadly. What's going on here? And I, I'm talking to men all the time. It is destroying relationships. I've heard doctors say, if only I'd known more about menopause, I wouldn't have divorced my wife. So it's happening everywhere. And again, it's that acknowledgement, that learning process, the understanding about how powerful hormones really are and how they affect our daily lives, which in turn affect all those around us. So it's at home and at work.
So let's talk a little bit about that cognition piece, and that really does come to affect you in the workplace, doesn't it? You've already described sort of sitting in meetings and forgetting, what you're saying, or losing a strand of thought. It has quite a powerful impact. I mean, I know myself, you could be sitting opposite somebody that you've worked with for a long time and you've completely forgotten their name. It's sort of profound, some of the some of the things that it kind of makes that happen to you, particularly in a workplace setting. I think when you might be under pressure, and especially when you think of the ages that menopause happens to women, that's often the time when you're, hoping to get to the top of your career and, wanting to make that impact and maybe get into a leadership role. And you've got all this stuff going on in your head.
But it's still happening in the workplace. I'm still hearing stories where women are in the boardroom and something happens. They may have a menstrual situation, a serious menstrual situation that they need to deal with, and by your own body that you need to get up and go somewhere and deal with something. And she was refused exit from the room, and other women who feel that they can't mention that they've lost the thread of what they're talking about. But we all lose the thread sometimes. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, or what you're doing. Something happens that crosses your mind and just completely throws you off kilter. I've lost my train of thought. What was I talking about? And we should be able to do that. But it seems to me that going through menopause, we feel more embarrassed about saying that. And I see somebody's put a comment there about ADHD, which apparently that's me. I never knew, but it answers so many questions. And, I've lived a life. I've learned to adapt to the way ADHD has affected my life. But it's certainly, that person, Morwenna, is certainly accurate in what is happening. And it's more happening more to women than it is to men. But I wonder, it crossed my mind a little while ago. One of my trainers said to me, she'd gone through an early menopause, and she said that she had been diagnosed with acute estrogen deficiency. And a light bulb went on. I thought, yay! What is that? In any other words, that's menopause. But because she was so young, it was an acute situation and it was a deficiency. So her medical resources were supporting her. Where, of course, when it comes to menopause, which is exactly that, acute estrogen deficiency, nothing happens. And we have to get on with it ourselves and find our own way through it. But luckily, the world is a much changing place. Certainly through COVID, I don't know what happened. We've accepted change. We're developing different ideas within the workplace about working practices, about all sorts of things, including health and well-being. And maybe there's just that tranche of women coming into the foreground now where they're talking about menopause more. Certainly celebrities and actresses. My daughter was telling me earlier this morning, you should see Instagram. It's full of actresses talking about having a bad day because of menopause. And so that's a good thing. We're talking about it. We're normalizing it. So it's not such a taboo anymore.
Yeah, and thank you for your question, Morwenna, because I think, Morwenna raises the issue that, as you said, GPs don't always get it right. Maybe the diagnosis has been for something else, or maybe you've been told you've got menopause and actually it is something else. There are lots of women who are now saying that they've been diagnosed with ADHD or whatever later on in life as well. So there could be some crossover. I mean, I'm not a medical expert, but there's definitely something in that, isn't it? And it's just being bolder as a woman and going to talk to your GP about the symptoms that you might be struggling with, and hopefully getting the right diagnosis at the end of it. Let's talk a lot more about the workplace. Obviously, there are a lot of us in the workplace. 4.5 million working women aged between 50 and 65. About 1 million are reported to have left employment because of menopausal symptoms. That's 14 million working days lost, and a cost of, I think they estimated a report I saw in The Guardian today, of £10 billion to the economy. So it's not just women talking about something that's only to do with them. It has a massive impact right through our work and right through the economy, doesn't it, Kathryn?
Yes, yeah. And what is a workplace all about? What is an organization all about? It's they sell widgets, whatever. They're an organization that specializes in a particular thing or many things. And their aim is to make that as efficient as possible. And a lot of them recognize that health and well-being of their staff, a healthy workforce, certainly is more productive. And if you're there to support your staff, it helps reduce absenteeism. And then menopause comes along. You mentioned 4.5 million women in work or leaving, and 1 million leaving, 4.5 million women in the workplace. And of course, women are making history again, because this is the first time in our history that we are working to a much later age, and more of us are working full time. And working to a later age has happened because the pension age changed. So they find themselves having to work more. And more, we see often have to work more, not for financial reasons, not just because they enjoy working. As I do. I've got the best job in the world. I love what I do. But there are a lot of pressures still on women as carers. And there's a lot of there are a lot of stats out there and research, and a lot of books have been written about the unpaid hours that women have to cope with. I think it's 8 hours, an extra 8 hours of work a week, unpaid, but is down to caring. And they compared it to a partner's life, or if they were single, they may still have those caring responsibilities. But when it comes to a partner's life, there's no difference. There's still that inequity that we're not sharing as much as we should. It's getting better, but there are still some inequity there. And it's about understanding that menopause is just a phase in a woman's life. And because they're working, it's affecting their place at work. And they are reluctant to put their hand up and say something about it. They don't want a spotlight shone on it. All they want to do is that the workplace accepts that this happens. We've got support people in place to help you through this. But not, shining, this woman's got menopause, shine the light, we've got to do something to her. She doesn't want that. Never, ever has she wanted that. She just wants to get on with her job, to get promotion if that's her desire, to still be included when there are workplace training being offered, because she wants to grow and develop as well. We don't stop learning just because we're aging. In fact, going, I think 45 to 55 is when women are at their most creative and productive. So we don't want to lose that. We need to harness everything that's going on there, allow women to go on training schemes, allow women to be promoted. They're being sidestepped, sidelined, because people look at them and they might have grey hair like mine and say, oh, well, but she's going to leave soon, she's bound to retire, we won't offer her this promotion. And it's just so unfair. So we've just got to equalise the benefits across the board for women, and just recognise menopause as a transitional period. And if we have the right education in place, the right training and support in place, it will just flow so much more smoothly than women resigning. And because what does that cause? That's a huge cost to any organisation. For replacement costs, you know what it costs, millions of pounds. And it's so unnecessary if we just take a few simple steps early on to recognise and understand what's going on, and so that we can just accommodate it and still the waters, and everybody's much happier. We're all talking about it instead of, Chinese whispers and all that sort of thing.
The training that you do, Kathryn, you train people to be sort of menopause managers, I think, in the workplace, don't you? How does that work in terms of creating menopause policies at work? That might be easy enough if you're a big organisation, maybe, to have some policies in place, and are policies the right thing? But quite difficult for smaller companies, I would imagine.
Yes, well, we offer two things for the larger organisations. What we do with our training course is CPD has CPT accreditation, and it doesn't just cover menopause. It covers about how menopause fits into an organisational culture, the EDI processes that they've got in place, the legal implications of everything that's going on, and how that fits around menopause, and how to be more inclusive with it. So for a large organisation, that's obviously much easier for them to set aside. They put their strategy in place, and we come in and help them fulfill that role, and it can be bespoke to their industry. But when it comes to SMEs, of course, they may only have one person that's looking to do something. So we have what we call open courses, if you like. They're run on Zoom, and so if you only have one person that needs to join in, we can join you up, and we will go through exactly the same process that a large organisation have. They might have more whistles and bells on the end of it, but you will have everything you need to know to go back to your organisation and share and support and help everybody else within it. So it's not necessarily, oh, I've got to have 10 people to do the course. No, you just need one.
Yeah.
And so that you become part of a group of different organizations. Sharing stories, sharing experiences, so that all feeds into the final result of how you're looking at the total health and well-being of your staff.
So if you've got a group set up at work and you have got a sort of support, a place for women and men, people of any gender, to discuss menopause. How do you know if it's having any impact? I guess that's the point, isn't it? And measurement is very important to you, isn't it, in terms of how organisations actually track whether what they're doing is helping to conquer this in the workplace or not. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, in my opinion, there's no point in having training if you're just doing it to tick a box. And that comes back to that thing about policy. And even for smaller organisations, I would recommend guidelines. Policy becomes a legal document and has legal implications. So why not just go down the recommended guidance route, and then you can develop a policy from there. But when it comes to, I've lost my train of thought now.
I was just talking about the fact that how do you measure it?
Yes,
if you've got something in place, whether it's a policy or guidelines,
yes,
how do you know if it's actually having an impact?
Yes, well, that all starts at the beginning when you're planning. What training do we need? What are our guidelines going to look like? What's the timescale? Who needs to know? What do they need to know? And how do you measure it? So when you're doing the training, you're thinking about how you're going to put this information into your workplace, sharing it with your directors, your teams, whoever else is involved. And you're looking at what systems you already have in place. Maybe you have HR measuring systems for absenteeism, whatever. There may be a whole raft of subjects in there that could cover, or we could add to include menopause. So it's looking at absenteeism protocols, return to work protocols, and how they fit in with the whole menopause thing, because there have already been court cases where judges have thrown out absenteeism and return to work strategies and protocols. They're not fit for purpose as they've been described because they were written in historic times and never been changed. We're in a different world today. We're facing different challenges, different illnesses, different processes. And that needs to be accommodated in our own thought processes when we're looking at absenteeism. Why? Let's go through some question and answer, and return to work. And again, if somebody, you hear through the grapevine that somebody's thinking of leaving, why are they thinking of leaving? Let's get to the bottom of that. Is it a much more simple answer than I just can't stand this job anymore? And that will benefit the organisation hugely by understanding, by joining up those dots with the training and then the measurement of it, that it's actually working, that they are reducing absenteeism, they are increasing productivity, and they are improving retention, because they are the three cost factors of any organisation today.
The House of Commons committee a while back called for a government consultation about making menopause a protected characteristic. And that's about providing some kind of legal protection, isn't it? And making those kind of reasonable adjustments in the workplace. Where are we with that at the moment? Is there any sign that will actually happen?
We wait and see. I do hope so. Menopause is covered in the Disability Act. So you've got age discrimination, ethnicity, and disability. And so if whenever anybody's talking about that at work and getting serious and talking about disciplinary procedures, somebody gets the sack, it goes to tribunal. It is covered under the Disability Act, but it's not specific. It has to be named. So it goes around the houses, really. It's going around all these different roads to arrive at the same result, when, of course, if we had the special process in place and recognise that menopause is part of it, it has a name, we recognise it, then everybody's going to be a lot happier. I think it'll be an easier route to discuss, debate, accommodate. And certainly with any organisation, that's probably a good talking point. If that does become law, it can be a discussion within the organisation. This has just become law. What do you think about it? Do we do enough about menopause? Are we talking about menopause? Let's start a conversation if you haven't done anything yet. So yeah. It's all benefits, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. And I think I was looking at some statistics earlier. Employment tribunals citing menopause rose by 44% last year. So, you know, companies have got to deal with this in some shape or form, and the government too, doesn't it?
Yes.
So how do we update the workplace to reflect the menopause experience that the people are having? Is it things like having a female line manager that you can go to and talk to if you are finding things difficult? How can the individual woman who's going through this approach this with her employer?
I think the first thing that has to happen is that somebody starts a conversation, and perhaps anybody present on the call here today, this could be a starting point. You can go back to your workplace, back to your teams, back to your networks, back to your groups, and say, guess what? I've joined in a webinar today about menopause, and I was so surprised at some of the information that was coming out of there. Leave a gap. Somebody will pick up on that. So you're starting the conversation. And I would recommend that you are inclusive in that conversation. Don't just give it to the women's groups. If you've got you're a large organization and you have a particular women's group, don't think that you can just hide it in, we'll give it to the women's group, they'll sort it out. No, this is affecting everyone. Menopause is treated as a minority issue, and yet 12, 13 million women currently going through menopause, and 80% of those will be experiencing debilitating symptoms in one form or another, to one degree or another. So it's not a minority issue, and we need to start recognizing that it's a transitional period in a woman's life. Anybody born with a reproductive system will experience menopause in some form or other. So let's just say, oh, okay, it's that big, is it? In some cases, it's gone to tribunal. Why did it get there? Because maybe the line manager and the woman herself hadn't recognized they were going through menopause, and he didn't know enough about it. I say he because most managers are male. And so do you go to look for a female line manager? Not always, because sometimes if they're younger than you, they may not understand. And I hear so many stories of women now transitioning menopause. When they were younger, as managers, they heard somebody saying that they were going through menopause, or they were having challenges with symptoms or whatever, and it's just, well, you just got to get on with it. Yeah. And now they could kick themselves for not being aware and recognizing it, and helping and supporting those women, those valuable women in the workplace that provide so much for the success of any industry. It comes back to knowing more. So who wants to know? It's generally, it's not a case of you, and you're going on this course. I think it has to be more about, initially, certainly, who wants to do this, who would like to get involved. And then, so from that small acorn, great oak trees go. So from that initial start, that starts a bigger conversation. And from that, a bigger conversation, and they can see by the information that's being transmitted, that's being absorbed and learned and understood and utilized in the workplace, that they can see how simple it is just to, right, now we really know who needs to know, and we really know what they need to know. We can create this. We have a strategy. It's part of, let's bring it in as part of our overall health and well-being strategy across the board. It's not isolated up here. It's part of the whole well-being thing.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you talked there about it's important to the male managers in the workplace, and we've got a number of men on the call today, and one comment, I don't think that's his actual name of a helmet, but he's talking here about thinks his wife is menopausal. And having to remind himself to give her some space, because at times that she maybe she's sort of struggling a bit, but he's talking here, what does she have to do to get a diagnosis to be taken seriously? And it's it's really important that the partners, the managers at work who are men, understand this just as well as women, isn't it?
Yes. It's vital, and I think men can be so insightful. They can see it happening. They know the person they're living with. They know the partner and what she is normally like. And this is so out of character that they recognize it. And I hear it time and time again. And again, Helmut was just saying there that his wife is 41 and being written off by the doctor as too young. It's because, sadly, GPs across the board, as we're learning more and more, have not had any menopause training. It's either, there are some there's some research over there you can go and look at, 45 minutes of slides and a discussion, or nothing at all. And that's doctors telling me about their menopause experiences. That is changing, but it's going to take a long, long time before we get to a stage where we're happy with women going to the surgery and saying, I think I'm going through menopause, or I'm this age. I don't know if I'm too young, I'm 30, but this is happening to me. And I know from talking to my peers and colleagues at work that possibly I might be going menopause. And well, the last thing we want is for the doctor to say, you're too young, it's got to be something else, or go away and come back in 3 months. Here's some antidepressants, that's probably all it is, a bit of anxiety. And so it's about recognizing that it's not this narrow age group of 48 to 52. Generally speaking, it's about 45 to 55, but we've got to look beyond that to be more inclusive of the younger and even older age groups that haven't started going through the menopause. Well, their bodies have started, but the symptoms have been later to come into view.
Yeah. Kathryn, let's just sort of go back then to you, if I can, and please, if anybody's got any other questions that you want to ask Kathryn, please pop them in the comments, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. But I'm just thinking back to your own experience. You sort of self-diagnosed yourself, then you started to read up, and finally got some recognition that it probably was menopause that you had gone through. But what helped you in the end? In everybody's experience of this is very different, isn't it? Well, what helped you? What helped you get through? Or was there nothing really at the time, and it's only really on reflection that you can now see what would have helped?
Yeah, I think it's, if only I knew then what I know now. I mean, first of all, it's knowledge, a little bit of education, understanding that my body is really going through these changes, because I didn't realize that at the time. And I'm the type of person, I have to know something. I've got to put a handle on this thing that's going on in my body. And it was such a surprise to me to find out that I wasn't the only one. I started to research, and looking at research, books that have been written, autobiographies, and I'm thinking, they're reading my mail. This is me they're talking about, and that gives you some sense of satisfaction in a way. You think, oh, thank goodness it's not just me. And that led me down another trail. I was looking at psychology, and I wanted to join up the dots medically, which is why I joined the British Menopause Society. And I was the first lay person to be elected to their medical advisory committee. So there I am, sitting around a table of ologists. And I'm thinking, well, they get it. They've all got different specialities. They're not just gynecologists, which is what I first thought. There's brain, heart, cancer, you name it. They were all round the table. And I thought, so they're joining up the dots. I'm trying to join up the dots. I now get the connection with the hormones all over the body and the messages that are being transmitted. But it's academics talking to academics, it's physicians talking to physicians. The information really wasn't getting down to people on the ground, like me and you, which is why I started doing what I've started. And I think, I've got to do something about this. And so my first business was Simply Hormones, and on my website, we look at programs that Davina McCall has produced, which are amazing, really bringing it to a much wider audience, the pros and the cons and everything in between. But I had that on my first website. So it just, and now I've noticed some celebrities are saying, why do we have to keep reinventing the wheel? Yes, absolutely. Why do we have to keep reinventing the wheel? We found out all this stuff. We know what happens. We know the connections. We know A goes to B to C to D, and how do you get a good result at the end? So we know the processes, and we've got solutions in place, both in work and medically, that we can help and support women. But for goodness sake, why isn't it out there on the billboards, on the TV, in films? Why do we have to keep reinventing the wheel? I think it's trickle, it's drip fed, if you like. There are millions of women, and in my own menopause bubble, I think we're making great waves and creating a great pathway to people understanding more and doing something about it in the workplace. But really, we're only a tiny portion of this great population of ours, and that's just in the UK. Let's not talk about the rest of the world, because it's variable. But I think the UK is leading the way. I have to say that, because it's being spoken about by government in the Houses of Parliament. That's a first. I haven't seen that anywhere else. And we are talking to people from other countries. They say the UK is leading the way when it comes to menopause understanding. So that's huge for us, but we still have a long way to go. And thank you for this webinar today, Jane, because that's spreading the word even further and getting the word out there.
So perhaps we could sort of round up by looking at some just sort of short, quick advice, Kathryn. If you're a woman on this call and you feel you've been struggling, you're not sure if you're going through the menopause or coming up to it, what would your best advice be?
There's start a conversation. Talk, if your mother's around, talk to her. Talk to colleagues, talk to girlfriends, talk to anybody just start a conversation and see what happens. I think that's the simplest thing to do. There are websites out there. One of my favorite is the patient arm of the British Menopause Society is Women's Health Concern. So you're getting all the medical information has been filtered down into that website, and they've got all sorts of special pieces of information. And you used to be able to give them a call or an email. That was pre-COVID. But at least it's valuable information. It's not something somebody's made up. And if you want it to go into the workplace, have a conversation with your manager at work, see what happens. I know somebody I know did that. She said, I'm struggling with menopause. I really need some help and support, a particular type of work she was doing. And lovingly, he said, I thought brilliantly, he said, I know nothing about menopause, but I will do absolutely everything I can to support you. And that's all we need, isn't it? So that's a connection that started a conversation. And it's just about, yes, we would love to put our training courses all over the place and bring that new information in there so everybody feels they understand and it's settled and they're using it and valuing it. But certainly at the beginning, start a conversation. Don't look for a policy, because they just get too complicated. So start with a conversation and perhaps creating some guidelines. It's not going to happen overnight, because guidelines take a lot of thought. What needs to go in there? Who needs to know? Who needs to access it? What's the end result? What do we need them to get out of this? What are the benefits? So there are a lot of things to think about, but just start talking.
And from an employer point of view, what should employers be thinking about? Because you know, especially if you've not got a big workforce, having people absent because of menopause could be quite tricky, couldn't it?
Yes.
What's the sort of advice that you'd be giving there, Kathryn?
I think what is useful these days is there are more opportunities for small companies who perhaps engage a third-party HR organisation to help them deal with that element, because you don't have enough staff to have an HR department. It's you know, I was in business with my husband, and I was HR, I was sales, I was marketing, and it's just not possible. You can't be good at all those things. And so if you're using a third party HR provider, that's brilliant, because that HR provider can perhaps bring together other organizations who may only have one or two people that they want to know a bit more about menopause, to help understand it and to help see how it fits within their organization, so that they can support everybody within it. It's not just about how many women you employ, it's about how many of your employees have partners who are experiencing menopause. Those partners may not be working for you, but you can bet your bottom dollar that those people are coming into the workplace with challenges and issues that they've left behind at home that morning, and they're struggling to understand whether they still have a relationship, what they're going to do about the kids, what happens about the house, all this turmoil, this stuff going on, this and how do I deal with it? And now I've got to do my, oh, somebody's asked me a question, what did they say? Oh yeah, I'm supposed to be dealing with this. And so that's happening across the board, and it's just about quelling that noise and making it more reasonable for everybody to understand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And then the other question really is, you know, advice for partners of women who are going through this. What would you say to them?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. Understanding, recognizing, as I said, men do have so many men have insight into what's happening to their partner, and they want to support them. They want to fix it. It's not always fixable. As one chap said, he realizes that he needs to give his partner space so that she can understand herself. But it's coming together and having that conversation that can be quite painful, because women are saying, look, if I'm going through menopause, that means I'm old. That's the end. And I think we've got to get over that hurdle. Menopause doesn't mean you're old. Menopause just means you're going through a hormonal transition that is part of your life. And you might be 35 when it happens, never mind 55. And but even when you're 55, we're not old anymore. You know, I'm way beyond that. I've got a new career, and I've never felt so passionate and so creative and so productive as I do now. So it's not about thinking I'm too old and I don't want to know. You need to know for your own sense of well-being, for your own, to improve your quality of life, to improve the quality of life within your relationship, and how that filters out to the rest of your community and network.
Kathryn, listen, has been fantastic sort of 40 minutes or so. I really appreciate your company, and I think hopefully everybody on the call listening in today has learned something and can take that back to their home life or into their workplace. Just to kind of remind everybody about what we do at Frog Systems, we provide first line support for employee wellbeing. We're very much hoping Kathryn will be with us over the next few months, giving more insight into the menopause as well. So you can follow us on social media. We'll be putting this recording up on our YouTube channel as soon as it's ready, and so please do share it with anybody you know that you think might help them. Kathryn, thanks very much for your company. Really enjoyed speaking to you today, and thank you everybody for tuning in. Really good of you to come along and enjoy the rest of your day.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.